So I was asked to talk about creativity, so I thought I would talk a little bit about perspectives and how these perspectives bring inspiration. So I'd like to start with my friend's project. This is the Night Heron, a project of my friend named Nathan Austin. And in this story, I think there's some lessons about perspective and creativity. And then I'll show you how I apply that to my own work. So this is the Night Heron, and the lesson, oops, no of us, okay. The Night Heron is a speakeasy that was in New York City. It took place in this abandoned building. Like the future of business, like the future of everything, it requires you to go into a dark passage through to the unknown. Sometimes it requires you to climb up to the top of a tall building in the middle of Manhattan and climb up a ladder like this. But then you get to the light at the end of the tunnel and you see that there's people there to greet you. And there's a bar there where you're offered a drink where it's warm inside. And there's people there and there's music and there is community. So what are the lessons we get from something like this, right? This was an amazing project that was a little bit outside of the norm, outside of the law even. This was an illegal speakeasy bar in a water tower in Manhattan in an abandoned building. So what did Nathan and his collaborators do to find the perspective and the creativity to create the Night Heron? First, they looked back at the historical context. In New York and the United States, we have this history of speakeasies that came from the era of Prohibition when alcohol was illegal and bars existed in basements behind hidden doors. So they tapped into this history, they tapped into this heritage. And they also looked at the underground scene in New York City with artists that were squatting loft spaces in the 60s and the 70s and 80s. Then they also looked around at the current situation. They saw Manhattan, New York City, a very expensive city, that was pushing the underground further and further underground or further and further away from the center of the city. And they saw the need for this, the desire for a scene, a desire for something authentic. And then they looked forward to the recently possible. So it looks like a very low-tech project. A lot of the things were handmade from recycled pieces in an old abandoned building, but there was a very high-tech aspect to this as well. They found this space using Google Maps. Nathan grew up in Alaska, so he climbs trees and climbs buildings, and so they found a few spaces on Google Maps, cross-referenced it with municipal records about abandoned spaces or spaces with owners that owned lots of spaces that wouldn't notice. And, and then he visited several, found the perfect place, built the bar, and made this happen. It was also very high-tech in the sense that to find this space, you had to text, send an SMS text, and then they would give you instructions to meet at a certain time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my own projects and how this framework of looking back, looking around, and looking forward works in my own creative process. So this is a collaboration between the publisher The Pigeonhole, based in Berlin and London, and Wisdom Hackers, which is a collective of artists, activists, and writers that I'm a part of. So in the 19th century, in the time of Charles Dickens, books were very expensive. So a lot of people couldn't afford books, but you could get books in serialized form. They came with your newspaper. You would get a new edition every week or every month. It was similar to how we consume TV shows, how we consume telenovelas today, right? So books were the kind of social stories of the day where people read the books and then they talked about the books with their friends and with their family. So that's looking back. Looking around and looking forward, we see that reading looks pretty different today. We have e-readers, we can read books from multiple devices, but oftentimes it's a solitary pursuit. So how do we combine these things of the past and of the recent, present, and future? So the Pigeonhole re-released Great Expectations by Charles Dickens as a serialized novel. So you actually subscribe online for free, and then you can read the book in chapters online. They release a new chapter every week, and you can also get it on your iPhone or Android device. But because they wanted to do something new and not just repeat something old, they added these special features. So it's sort of like when you get your DVD and you get the special features of interview with the director or behind the scenes with the actors. Every week you also get a special feature where you can watch videos, listen to interviews about different aspects of Great Expectations and the historical context. So why not apply the same model looking to the past and to the future for new kinds of content? So this is where wisdom hackers came in. So we were a group of people, a group of friends who just had different questions, different burning questions that we wanted to ask about the contemporary condition and the times we were living in. So some of these questions had to do with the balance between freedom and structure in the way we produce. Some of the questions had to do with how we tap into the past, how we tap into magic and traditions of the past and use them in the present. And some of them had to do with the way that we relate to each other in contemporary times when we all have cell phones. So using the same model as Great Expectations, mixing the present and the past, we released Wisdom Hackers. We're now in week 8 or 9 of a 10-week series. And so every week, one of the writers releases an essay about some question that they have. My essay was about the thinking body, the connection between the body and the mind in the way that we produce in the knowledge economy today. My friend Nathan talked about the hacker generation and how hacking has become such a big social phenomenon and some of the limitations of hacking. And like with Great Expectations, every week you also get a special feature where you can see either a video or an interview or see photos from the authors. And then just to also look at the past and the future again, the publisher, Pigeonhole, has the rights to the work for about a year, after which we want to borrow a little bit from the art world and from the past and actually release a handmade version of Wisdom Hackers, limited edition for collectors. They'll be handmade, and we'll release the rest of the text for free online. So then more people will be able to access the text, but we'll also have these art objects for posterity. Next, I want to talk about the future of consumer credit. So this is Happy Mango. They're a client of ours at Foossa. So for any of you guys who have ever lived in the United States or studied in the United States, you'll know that your credit report is really important. Your credit score is a number in the US that helps determine the interest rates that you pay on a bank loan, on your credit card. It also determines if you can get an apartment, buy a car, buy a house, sometimes even get a job. The problem is 1 in 5 Americans has a problem on their credit report just because the data sets are so big, there's so many errors. What other industry allows for a 1 in 5, a 20% error rate? And like I said, this is an important number. 95% of lending decisions in the United States begin with a credit score. So if you don't have a good score, you have a lot of trouble. This is partially because looking around, 3 companies dominate the consumer credit market in the United States. And all 3 of them basically use a variation of the same algorithm, which is 30 years old. It's based on 30-year-old technology before we had the computing power to really calculate personalized and accurate credit reports. So you can see here that traditional credit reports only really look at 2 things: liabilities and payments. So that's how much you owe and how good you are at paying them back. They don't actually ask you how much money you make, how much you spend. They don't ask your family, your friends, or your employer how trustworthy you are as a person. So sometimes you could miss 1 payment while you're a student, and then you'll have bad credit for 7 years, even though you've had perfect payments for the last 7 years since. So in the old days, looking backwards of banking, we didn't have data sets at all. We had bankers who had relationships with their clients, and they knew you, and they knew your family, they knew your business, they knew if you were a trustworthy person because your banker was somebody in your community. So how do we scale that using technologies that we have today? So with Happy Mango, we're building a product and a movement to humanize credit. So to use contemporary technologies to bring back an old idea of humanized credit. So with Happy Mango, we want to look at all of these things, looking at your payments, your liabilities, your income, your employment, your family and friends. And the way we're going to do this is mining the data that's already out there, from LinkedIn to Facebook to financial records through your bank. So using technologies like mint.com, where you can connect your bank information, your credit card information. We can look at how much money you make, how much money you spend, and from there we can create a far more accurate, far more humanized credit score. So here's a little bit about how it works. We haven't launched yet, so this is a preview. But this, you can't see it very well, but this is a projection based on user data that tells you how much you can afford to borrow. So if I want to take out a mortgage, this can help me calculate different scenarios in real time using real information. And this is another screen to show me how much money I have left over at the end of the month if I take on this loan, and is it worth it for me to do this? And here's a screen for social information. So to humanize credit, I can bring in people who know me well, my friends, family members, my employer, and they can write recommendation letters for me, just like if I'm applying for a job. And they can write things about my character, that I'm a trustworthy person, and that helps in the making of that credit decision for the banker, for the lender. And finally, we connect users with lending sources. So now that you've created a new, personalized, humanized credit score, you can go here and you can apply for loans, for a personal loan, for a car loan, for a home mortgage. So that's an example of looking backwards and using present technologies to create the future. My final example is Catalyst, which is a collective intelligence project. It's a research and innovation project that I'm a part of that's funded by the European Commission. So what is collective intelligence? If you look around at nature, you see bees and ants, and you'll see that a colony of bees has a kind of intelligence that's greater than any single bee. So can we do that with humans? You might have heard of crowdsourcing, and collective intelligence is a related phenomenon, related thing to crowdsourcing. So here's an example of a crowdsourcing site called Challenge Post that was created, a friend of mine named Brandon. And this is a community of developers, and you can go on here and you can take part in different kinds of challenges where you try to solve technical problems. But it's really mostly a contest. It's about opening the doors to participation and trying to find one right answer or a few right answers. There's similar things in design for development. This is Open IDEO, where they open the doors to designers, development professionals to find solutions for problems in international development. But what happens if you're sort of a regular person, you're not technically oriented? It can be hard because the barrier to entry is technical, right? What if you don't understand Wikipedia and the social norms or how to write in wiki markup language? If we look back at the history of civic engagement and democracy, in the United States we have this history of community meetings and town hall meetings where citizens could talk to other citizens and discuss the political and the social affairs of that day. It worked really well in kind of small towns, but how do we scale that to the present day? And we see things like President Obama going on Reddit to do a Ask Me Everything interview, but it still is just a question and answer session, right? It doesn't scale when you have thousands of questions and responses, and it's just the president, it's one to many, but it's not many to many. People aren't creating something new together. They're just having a large conversation. So with Catalyst, we're building out a series of tools to help make this better. And Catalyst is a collaboration between government, private sector, and universities across Europe and North America. And so here are some of the tools. I'll just talk about a couple of them. So this is Debate Hub, and this is a new kind of debate tool where people can go on, have debates and discussions like they would do in any other forum. The difference is Debate Hub has a dashboard. Just like you use Google Analytics to look at how many people look at your web pages, look at how many people are clicking on different things. This is a dashboard for relationships between people in your community online and between arguments and different pros and cons of a given idea. Here's another example. This is from EdgeSense, and this is a visualization of a community in Matera. It's a town in Italy. And it's showing that this is a very dense network of people where all of the users in the network are talking well to other people in the network. So there are very few cliques of people who are isolated in different areas. People are very cohesive in this community. And so here's a comparison between two online communities. On the left, there's Innovatori, and on the right, there's Matera. And you'll see that in Matera, there's far more social cohesion among the members. Everybody talks to everybody else. And on this side, you see in this yellow circle that there's sort of one charismatic person that's connected to his or her own clique of followers, but they're not really interacting with the rest of the people. So with these kind of analytics, as community managers, as people trying to find solutions in communities, we're able to understand things and then make interventions. So we can say, hey, why don't you talk to those people in blue over there? So that was just a small glimpse into some of the projects and the perspectives that we've been working on. And I just wanted to finish up by saying that in order to have the perspective to solve the problems that we have, in order to find the creativity to solve the problems that we face, we have to look all over the place. We have to look back into our heritage, into our history. We have to look around. We have to look into unexpected places like abandoned buildings with the Night Heron, climb on top of buildings and look around, look in places that other people have overlooked. And from there, we'll have the pieces to build the future together. So thank you very much.